I think that you're starting to see the digital transformation of law firms and of legal departments because they have to as a result of COVID. So the companies that are tapping into that, I think will be very successful. The ones that are a bit of a distraction from that might struggle. And so I look for companies where they've got the timing right. And sometimes that's just pure luck.
Today on LawNext, Jules Miller. She's a partner in the venture capital firm Mindset Ventures, which recently participated in the Series A financing of legal marketplace Priori Legal, which listeners may remember was the topic of this podcast on October 28th. She was also, until earlier this year, partner in IBM Blockchain Ventures, lead for IBM Blockchain Accelerator. She's a three-time entrepreneur, including twice in legal technology, first as the co-founder in 2012 and COO of the legal tech company Hire and Esquire, which provided on-demand workforce of attorneys for law firms and legal departments. And then as the co-founder in 2015 and managing director of Evolve Law, a member network of legal tech startups and innovators, later acquired by Above the Law. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to our interview in a moment, but first let's hear about the sponsors who make this show possible. Now on to today's interview. Jules Miller, welcome to LawNext.
Hi, Bob, and thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Thanks for doing it. It's good to talk to you. It's been a while since we've spoken, and I have to say, I feel like you're one of the most peripatetic people I know. You always seem to be going somewhere exotic. So I'm wondering how the past year has been for you. Have you been kind of stuck in one place, or have you still been able to do some travel and get around?
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think, I've run into your son in Bali and all sorts of crazy things.
Yeah, I was going to say we have like the best small world story ever. I think it's.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the world is small after all, and especially in legal tech. But I think that I did take a couple of years actually to be a little bit of a roving digital nomad, and so I had the fortunate ability with my job to work from anywhere, even before the pandemic. And so was really taking advantage of that. And what's interesting in the pandemic is I have been in one place. I did end up moving from New York to Los Angeles and have been mostly staying in Los Angeles, but it's been nice. I haven't been on a plane. I actually have time to meditate and think and exercise and stuff. So I've actually been enjoying it, although I'm starting to be ready for 2021 and some sort of end to this insight. But I think it's a good reminder to just, we don't have downtime very often, and to take the time for doing what you need to do personally.
Yeah. And I remember when my son contacted me, who was a bit of a nomad himself at times, but who was off spending some time in Bali, and said, I ran to somebody here. I thought that was so strange. But and yet, even as this year has been strange as it has been, you've started a new job and headed off in a slightly different direction. Well, I guess it's a very consistent direction for you, but at least a new job.
Yeah. So I've kind of been in and out of the startup and the venture world for the past 15 years, and was, as you mentioned previously, at IBM in their Blockchain Ventures group. Corporate is a weird place for venture. It's not. It's hard to get things done in an entrepreneurial and fast way. Really appreciated the time there, but ended up joining about 7 months ago now, an incredible fund called Mindset Ventures. So we're on our third fund. We do B2B software investment. And while legal tech isn't our focus, the team there was very interested and open to having me focus on legal tech as one of the several verticals that I look at, including blockchain, including fintech, including insurtech, and a couple other things. And so we did our first deal in the space. We write like average $1 million checks, usually in Series A rounds, but can go from seed to Series B, a little up or down from there. It's been great. I've done 4 deals in the last 6 or 7 months, and legal tech is one of them, and I'm actively looking at more deals. It's an exciting space still, and I can't quite leave it, right? I've tried a couple times to not look at legal tech and to move on, and I just keep coming back to it because I still think there's so much opportunity and so much momentum now, especially with the pandemic, that there's kind of no going back, and there's lots of opportunity and positivity going forward.
It's interesting because when you started your first legal tech company, you didn't come into it as far as I can tell, with any real background in law, you were not like some entrepreneurs tend to be recovering lawyers or have otherwise worked in the legal field, and you had previously been an entrepreneur and a founder of a company in what looks like a very different space to me, sustainable environmental sustainability. How did you first get interested in the legal world back in, what was it, 2012?
Yeah. So I will say I intentionally did not become a lawyer. So I was actually interested in becoming a lawyer when I was an undergrad and took several, constitutional law classes and things like that. And I loved the idea and the education of being a lawyer. But then I found out what associates do for the first few years, and I went, "Yep, sorry, not interested."
Yeah.
So I had a slightly different path. I worked at Ernst & Young. And I ended up in this environmental sustainability space for about 7 years. I was at Salesforce and a couple other places. And I ended up starting a company. It was not a tech company. It was, hiring professional sustainability consultants on demand, including myself. And I had a team of people that we were hired out basically as fractional chief sustainability officers. And so I did that for a couple of years. And what was interesting is a good friend of mine from high school, Julia Shapiro, was a lawyer. And she had kind of started on this concept of hire an Esquire. And I went, oh, legal industry can't be that different from accounting or from what I'm doing here with sustainability experts. It's just people, right? It's a professional service where people are the product. Law can't be that different. And man, I learned a lot and how wrong I was over the years. But it was a wild ride, and I think I became one of the most passionate advocates of legal tech and reforming the legal industry in a tech-enabled way. And I like to say evolve and not disrupt, because I don't think the legal industry will totally be disrupted in the way other industries can be. But I do think that change is coming, change has come, and it will continue to evolve over the next couple of decades. So I'm excited to be part of that ride.
Yeah, I first met you, I think I first talked to you back when you and Mary Jutton founded Evolve Law in 2015. I don't remember having spoken to you before that, but I looked back at the conversation I had with you then when you said to me, and this is a quote from you, you said, our focus is to make some noise and shake things up in the legal industry. We're trying to get people to listen. The message is that the legal industry is changing. If lawyers are not using the technology that's out there, they're going to be left behind. It was in 2015. I realize you've sort of been in and out of the legal industry, but do you think, have we made any progress since then?
Yeah, we've made an enormous amount of progress, but like the legal industry is known for, it's a little bit slow, right? It's a little slower than other industries, but it's happening, and it's happening, like all good innovation and all good disruption. At first, you can't tell it's happening, and then all of a sudden things are massively different, and you just don't even see it coming. And I think that's kind of what's happening in the legal industry here. I think as an entrepreneur, I was an eternal optimist, and I can't help but being an optimist, unfortunately. And I do think that when we were, 2012 to 2017, 18, we were a little early, right, to build a real big company in the legal space. And I think we were kind of banging our heads against the many walls that come up in terms of adoption. It's not that the technology didn't work. It's not that the problems weren't there. It was just that the industry wasn't ready for adoption of technology at scale in the way that I actually think it is now. It was you're starting to get some indicators pre-COVID, and then actually COVID has really increased the fuel on the fire of really needing to change. I mean, the fact that people are working from home and you have to be enabled working from home, the fact that billable hour is still something that people struggle with, although I don't think that's going away. There's lots of alternatives to improve it and maybe do alternative pricing models. And so there's a lot of stuff happening, and the last year has only proven that it's necessary and it's not going away. And even in a post-COVID world, I think there's no going back.
Yeah. You're recently invested in Priori Legal, which it seems to have some similarities to what you're doing with Hire an Esquire. Is that a fair comparison? And is that part of the reason that you were attracted to it?
It is. And I've known Basha and Mira for 7-ish years. And when we were building the same company that is frenemies, basically, and I love the model, and it's something I know really deeply. I think a lot of companies at the beginning started out very similar. So it was, Hire an Esquire, Priori, Up Counsel, Law Trades. There are a bunch that were focusing on either the startup or small business market. And I think what I had been impressed with and how Priori has changed over the years is really going up market and focusing on the Fortune 500 in-house counsel market, and they're the only labor marketplace in the legal space that has managed to do that effectively. They do an incredible job. They've been growing like crazy. So while it started out kind of similar, I think over the years they evolved into different companies, and so but still the concept of a labor marketplace in legal and optimizing for really high quality talent in a way that's more flexible is something that both the clients, meaning the in-house counsel and law firms, as well as the practicing lawyers want. And so to me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. So is that something else where you feel that the market has evolved to the point where it's more ready for that kind of a service than maybe it was back in 2012?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And you have, of course, companies like Axiom and every staffing company out there who have really made the model work and made people more comfortable using people who might not be full-time employees of your business. And so I think they did a lot of the hard work in getting people to be comfortable with that adoption. I think the companies now that are in the space like Priori are automating things that just make it better, faster, cheaper, like every good tech company should do, and then offering things that you could never possibly do as a more brick and mortar company. So I think that the future is bright for that particular space within legal. When your people are your product, it's the most obvious way to innovate is to improve the efficiency, improve the way you hire and manage and retain the best people out there for the job.
Yeah. So now that you're at Mindset, you're going to be looking for other legal tech companies to possibly invest in. Is that right?
Oh yeah, I mean it's a space, like I said, I have particular expertise in,
Right.
hard won,
Yeah.
lots of scars,
Yeah.
and I still think there's opportunity. So yes, we're looking at legal tech companies. I think the challenge is that they have to compare favorably to the other companies we look at in other spaces. So legal tech, it doesn't get special terms and special accommodations because it's legal tech and because I happen to like it. It still has to be a great company that's growing quickly, that has all the potential to be $1 billion company or more. And unfortunately, in legal, I think a lot of companies are not quite there yet, but the ones that are have a lot of potential, and that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Well, but as you said earlier, the legal market it's a pretty unique market in a lot of ways. So how do you kind of make that comparison between the legal market and the broader technology market?
Yeah, it is, but it isn't. I actually get a little frustrated when it's like, well, we're different, we're legal. It's like, actually, you're not. Try working in the healthcare space. Healthcare is different, right?
Yeah.
So I think that yes, every industry has their own nuances, but that's what I do as an investor is understand those nuances and figure out where the opportunity is. Just because legal is challenging and has its own challenges doesn't mean you can't build a great business in it, and it doesn't mean you can't grow quickly. So what I don't like to hear is excuses. I like to hear founders who understand the challenges and they have good approaches and strategies for overcoming those challenges. What I don't like to hear is, well, we're not growing as fast because it's legal, and making a ton of excuses. That just doesn't fly, and you shouldn't be an entrepreneur if you're going to make a ton of excuses. There's always something that will stand in your way, and if you can't smash past it with a Big Mac truck to just blow past whatever challenges there are, don't be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Does the fact that you were an entrepreneur make you a better investor? I don't know how many investors were in fact previously entrepreneurs, or how common that is. I assume it's fairly common. But I mean, what did you learn from being an entrepreneur that helps you in being an investor?
Yeah, there's a split, right? There's a lot of investors who have been operators and entrepreneurs, and there's many investors, very good investors, who haven't. And I think each path someone takes gives them a different perspective. I think the thing that being an entrepreneur helps for me is having empathy with the founders. And so what tends to happen, and I have a great team at Mindset Ventures. They're fantastic. They're very smart, very gracious, very human, people who love working with the founders we work with. But I am the only one who has actually founded, raised money for a tech company. And so what I find is while we're in the investment process, there's not a lot of difference, right? We're looking at the company in the same way. But what I find is that after we make an investment, I connect more with the founders because I've been there and I've done it, and I know the challenges they face on a day-to-day basis. So I tend to be more effective working with the portfolio companies just because I know how to navigate those challenges because I've been in their shoes. And so I end up spending probably about 75% of my time actually working with their portfolio as opposed to, to sourcing, looking at and doing the deals, which I still do, of course. But we kind of try to focus on where we have our best efforts and where we have our most value add. And for me, I love rolling up my sleeves and working with the entrepreneurs.
That answers one of the questions I was going to ask you, which is just what does a venture capitalist do all day? When you get up in the morning, what do you do? What is a typical day for you?
It's great. And it's so funny. I was just talking to someone about how it's not quite as glamorous job as you think. And actually, fundamentally, we're service providers, right?
Yeah.
We're like glorified bankers that somehow have branded ourselves as really important. And I think it's good to remember that a lot of our job is not glamorous, right? Like I
Right.
look at PowerPoint presentations and I do Excel modeling to look at the value of a company. And if we want to invest, we do research and due diligence on markets. It's a lot of that. There is, of course, really wonderful, amazing things that I'm very grateful to be able to do, like work with founders who are incredible and learn a lot and have access to amazing data points that you could never have as an entrepreneur focused on one company because we're seeing a lot of information all the time, of a lot of flexibility as well, which is also really great. And someday we'll travel again because I have the ability to do that. But I think that, that you have to empathize with the fact, like I'm looking at, I get 20 PowerPoint decks a day
Right.
or more, and you've got to make an impression. I get a lot of cold outreach. You have to make an impression. I get a lot of warm intros. You've got to make an impression. And so I think it's good for a founder to empathize a little bit with the investors that they're pitching to, and we're all human, right? We're not robots. We're not doing anything that's particularly special, except we just have a seat at a table that happens to be investing capital. And so we get slightly different perspective on the market than an entrepreneur would. So there's actually I just also wrote a book that will be published by Wiley in February on corporate accelerators. And it was really interesting. We did a lot of research benchmarking and our own research and interviewed a ton of people. And one of the like very old, but still true piece of research from the Harvard Business Review was from like 1998 on like, what does a venture capitalist do?
Yeah.
And something like 70% of it is working with the portfolio, right? It's being on boards, it's being a consultant, it's being a coach, it's being a therapist to the founders.
Right.
It's that type of thing. And then the other kind of 20 to 30% is sales, basically. It's sourcing deals, it's looking at the deals, it's verifying and vetting the deals, making the decision on the deal. So it's more leverage to the kind of working with the portfolio than I think most founders appreciate and expect.
Yeah. On that deal side, what kinds of companies are you looking for, and at what stage of growth?
Yep. So we typically invest in seed to Series B deals, but most of our deals are either Series A extensions, B, pre-Bs, or kind of early Bs. So what we're really looking for is companies that have some sort of traction, right? I think this is also really important for the legal industry. I love the stage of companies that is exciting with, where they're developing a product and looking for product market fit, but that's not where we invest. We invest when there is something there that is really exciting and the founders have shown that they've got some semblance of product market fit, that they know how to sell, that they've got a pretty good product. And then where we help, and again, why I spend so much time with our portfolio is I like to roll up my sleeves and really be helpful. So make a ton of sales introductions, but I can't do that if the product's not ready for those introductions. My network, after working in the corporate space for 15 years, is big companies, big law firms, the largest enterprises in the world. And if a startup's not ready for that, not that they're not a great company, but we're not going to be able to be as helpful as we would with a company that's slightly later stage. So that's in terms of stage. And then, of course, we look for founders who are great founders we want to work with. This is a long-term relationship. We expect to be working with these companies for 5-10 years. And so we also have to believe that they're good people, that we want to work with them, that they have a clear vision and that we can support them, and that they're going to be able to execute.
And how do you evaluate that traction? Is it purely a numbers game, or are there other factors that you're looking at?
Yeah, once you go up the capital stack, it's like a little bit more numerical. So we're in the space where, so if you look at seed deals, it's really about believing in the founder, right? It's about, do I like you? Do I believe that you can build a company?
Yeah.
If you look at kind of series B and beyond, it becomes more and more financial. It's like there's a lot more financial analysis. There's a lot of looking at the numbers. Where we play, it's a little bit of a mix of both. We do a lot of analysis on the numbers. They have to make sense, but we're also still taking a little bit of a leap of faith on the founder. And so it's our diligence is both. It's looking at what the potential is from the traction and the numbers that they give us, knowing that they're just early indicators. And of course, every startup financial model is completely fabricated, and we don't hold anyone accountable to those numbers.
Yeah.
But they're an indication of how the founder thinks. And then we do a lot of diligence on the founder and the team and whether we believe they can execute. So it's a little bit of that mix of financial and human. And then as you know, the more up you go, the more money you raise, the more it becomes a lot more financial.
It seems that so many of the companies that I talk to are looking ahead or thinking about some VC or private equity investment. What kinds of companies are wrong for that? Is there a way to sort of generalize about who's right, who's wrong for outside investment like that?
Yeah, I think founders spend way too much time obsessing over raising capital.
Right.
I know you have to raise capital for your company, but VC is not the end all be all. And as you said, it's not right for every company. I think, and there's no shame in that, right? Actually, in fact, I think a lot of companies would be much better served not raising venture capital, which is why I spend a lot of my time, like I really like venture debt. I'm a scout for Indie VC. They have a really interesting debt platform and an alternative kind of funding model. I'm a venture partner at Republic, which is a crowdfunding platform. I am an EIR at 500 startups. Like I do a bunch of things that are kind of directing people to non-venture funding because I think sometimes that is better suited for certain types of companies. Venture capital is I've said this many times, like it's a train that once you get on, you cannot get off. And there are certain expectations of growth in particular that you need to hit as a venture-backed company. So if you're not growing 200+% a year, you probably shouldn't raise venture capital. And if you can't sustain that 200+% growth for 5+ years because your market isn't big enough or because for whatever reason, you're not able to do that, you should not raise venture capital. So VC is a very specific thing that is going to force a company to grow fast or die, right? It's one of those two things. As a VC, I have a portfolio, so I'm okay if 6 or 7 of 10 companies in my portfolio don't make it, because the ones that do, that are growing that fast, will be massively successful and make up for it. But as a founder, you don't really want to be one of those 5 or 6 or 7 companies that is being pushed to either go big or go bust, because you might have a good business that is a great business that might not necessarily need to grow that fast. And you might make more money, by the way, as a founder, if you don't take venture capital and you fund yourself in other ways.
Yeah. To you as an investor, is the ability of a company to grow rapidly more important than the sustainability of the company?
And, I say that with a grain of salt. Of course, we want companies that are going to be sustainable, that are going to be there for the long term. But again, venture capital is an asset class that the valuations are based on growth and growth potential.
Right.
So you need to be able to grow. It's the number one thing that people don't fully, I think, socialize as founders. They know they need to grow, but how fast and how big is, especially at the early stages, seems like, sure, we can do that. But then when you actually get into executing, it's like, okay, wow, we need to triple our numbers again this year. How do we do that? Like, you really have to think through, number one, if that's possible, and number two, how you will actually do that. And that's what I look for in founders, is they have a clear understanding of both of those things.
As we have heard, Jules Miller is a venture capitalist who is also the founder of 2 legal technology companies. After recently joining the VC firm Mindset Ventures and investing in the legal tech company Priori Legal, Miller is now looking to invest further in the legal tech sector. When we return, we'll hear about the types of companies and technologies that Miller is excited about right now, and she'll offer advice on how a founder can get the attention of a VC such as her. But first, these words from the sponsors who make this show possible. Welcome back to LawNext. This is Bob Ambrogi, and I'm speaking with Jules Miller, partner in the venture capital firm Mindset Ventures, and formerly the founder of 2 legal tech companies. Given that Miller and her co-founders in both her previous legal tech startups were women, I wondered about the extent to which diversity is a factor that she takes into account, and what she is doing as a VC to enhance diversity among the founders in whom she invests. We pick up our conversation there.
100%. And I think it's important to the venture industry as a whole right now. I think people are more conscious of it. Almost every VC fund is tracking it at minimum and working hard to increase the pipeline. For me in particular, as a founder who founded two venture-backed companies with other women, we were sexually harassed during the fundraising process. It was very clear that it was not that it has to be fair, but it was really stacked against people who weren't the typical young white male Silicon Valley founder. And that has luckily changed over the years, but that has very much hardened my belief that there are incredible companies that are undercapitalized, and in a lot of ways, better companies than some of the ones being founded. The challenge as an investor is that I also need to believe that the company is going to, number one, grow big enough and have the right mentality to grow, and number two, be able to raise downstream capital, right? So I invested in Series A. I need to believe that they can raise Series B rounds of funding. So there is still implicit bias in the venture space. We made a lot of progress pre-COVID, and then actually, very sadly, there's a lot of data out now from PitchBook and some other places that unfortunately COVID has let the venture industry revert to being where they are comfortable, which is investing mostly in white males again. And so there was progress. We've kind of taken a back step. I think it's top of mind at least now, and people are really trying. For me personally, I spend a lot of time making sure our pipeline is full of diverse founders, of incredible diverse founders who are equal to, if not better than, the other founders in our pipeline. But that takes work, and I think every venture fund has to do that. In legal tech, yes, it's a bit of a problem, but it's a problem everywhere. So I don't see it as bigger than any other space in the tech industry. In fact, part of the reason I liked legal tech as a founder is I found that there were actually a lot of diverse founders in legal tech, and part of that was because the law firms weren't promoting, diverse people, and so they got frustrated and left because they weren't on a partner track, and so they left and started their own companies. Those companies weren't necessarily getting funded to the degree that they probably should have. And so there's a lot of problems in a lot of stages of this process. But I think there's plenty of incredible founders in the legal tech space or potential founders in the legal tech space that are women, people of color, LGBTQ, everything. But we need to make sure that the funding is available and that we have the right mentality. Last point here is that I also find that there's a little bit of a scarcity mentality in some of the founders who are not used to or don't expect to raise venture capital. And so when they do raise money, they actually don't spend it, or they have a hard time actually spending it as fast as they need to in order to grow, because they're worried they're not going to be able to, just because of the institutional, mechanisms of funding over the pretty much forever. They don't want to run out of money and they want to maintain their business. But again, venture is a train you've got to stay on if you get on it, and do it and play it in the right way. And so you've got to spend that capital and believe that you're going to grow fast enough to raise the next round. So there's a little bit of a leap of faith that founders who maybe are resisting the spend that they need to have because of that kind of scarcity mentality, they need to make a real effort to get over that, to spend what they need to do to grow and to get to the next stage as fast as they can.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are getting better. I don't know that they're that much better, frankly. I mean, from what I've seen, some of the last, you may have seen the survey that Kristen Sonde from Paladin did back a couple of years ago of women and people of color among founders of legal tech companies, and the numbers are pretty dismal. I definitely think they're better over the last couple of years, but got a long ways to go, I think.
Yeah, Kristen's great, and her and Felicity at Paladin are fantastic, and I think they've raised a lot of awareness here. Like I said, this is a problem in every industry. Yes, legal tech's pretty bad, but it's wider than legal tech.
Yeah.
But we're working on it, right?
Yeah.
Venture is a slow space to change because this has been my view from the very beginning. So I have a lot to say about this topic. But you can't make these changes with PR and marketing and things that aren't real. The best way to encourage more VCs to invest in diverse founders is to make those diverse founders massively successful and massively wealthy and make money for all of their investors. And that takes 10 years, right? So It is changing. It's changing slowly, but we've got to see those big successes from women, people of color, and just other diverse founders who aren't from the traditional background. And then investors will be more comfortable investing in those founders. It takes a long time to break that quote unquote pattern recognition.
Right. A little bit of a chicken egg situation though, isn't it? I mean, if you don't get the investments, you may not get the growth. If you don't get the growth, you're not going to get the investments. So I don't know which comes first.
Yeah.
In the legal tech space, as you're looking at potential investment in the legal tech space, Is there anything that particularly excites you or interests you as you look around what's happening in the industry right now?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that excite me. I think on a broader sense, I specifically look for things that are either in one of two categories, is that they are a big enough niche where they can own that niche and it will be a massive company. That's a little bit harder, but it's possible. Or the things that I like more is why I like Priori and some of the other companies out there is that yes, they're focused on legal, but the technology could have broader applications in adjacent industries like healthcare, like accounting, like consulting, any business where it's a people business. Because as much as we like we believe legal is special. There are lots of similarities between legal and other industries, especially other professional services industries and knowledge-based economies. And so what I look for is companies that are focused and are looking to take over the legal industry and are using their first use case in legal, but have the possibility of growing beyond legal if and when they want to. And so that's what always gets me excited because that means they can build a massive company.
So are there any technologies that you can point to where you see that potential in legal right now?
So I like anything that I will call in the future of work category. So that's like HR tech. It's anything around again people management, things like that. I think in general I like different technology stacks. So as you mentioned at the beginning, I spent 2.5 years in the blockchain space at IBM. I look for blockchain companies. I think there will be massive blockchain wins, although unfortunately, I do think that that technology is going to take a little while to develop. So I look for companies, for example, that could be blockchain enabled and have might not need blockchain right now to function, but if and when blockchain becomes more widespread and used by big companies, then they can take advantage of that technology. Anything that's automation of very mundane processes is really important. So I think anything around contract automation, there's a lot of companies in that space, really exciting stuff, and again, has broader applicability. I actually really like companies, so I look for crossover companies as well. So anything in the fintech space around payments, and there's a lot of opportunities to do payments. There's stuff around obviously litigation finance and other payment opportunities in the legal space. I think that's really interesting as well, especially when there's a compliance angle. So I bundle reg tech or compliance tech into legal tech because I think even if the company calls themselves something else, if there's a major compliance angle, then to me that's legal tech. And that's really interesting. And I think there are some really big companies that aren't calling themselves legal tech that are actually legal tech. So I'm a big fan of Carta. And I can't remember if they raised a Series E or D financing recently. They're a big company by now. They have tons of capital and will probably go public in the next couple of years. They're fundamentally a legal tech company. DocuSign is a legal tech company. And if you look at what they do and how they got so big, I think that's a good indicator of the types of companies that can be successful in an industry that is either calling themselves legal tech or actually is legal tech and isn't saying they are.
Yeah, that's interesting. My last episode of this podcast, as a matter of fact, I had on a guy named Dan Broderick, who's a CEO of a company called Black Boiler, which is a contract automation technology. They had just gotten a $3.2 million raise. But that's one of the things he was talking about is he thinks really this is not, it's a technology that's being used in legal tech right now, but that the application for the technology goes way beyond legal tech to anything where there's sort of a repetitive document creation process going on, and that can be in all sorts of different settings. So it's interesting that you say that.
Yeah, I'll just say I rant a lot about don't box yourself into the legal tech space. You
Yeah.
might be serving legal companies, you might be legal tech as one of the areas that you focus on, but almost every company is not just legal tech, right? You're a document automation company, AI company, a blockchain company, a labor marketplace, a B2B SaaS company, whatever it is. Don't just focus on legal tech because that's very limiting. In order to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to have a big vision. And while you have to balance starting small and executing and growing with having a massive vision. And if you box yourself into one very small part of the market, you can't have a massive vision. So think bigger.
Yeah. So how does an entrepreneur get your attention? And what are you looking for in an entrepreneur as opposed to a business? What kind of characteristics are you looking for?
Yeah, so I think unfortunately a lot of the world, but especially the venture space, is all about about connections, right? Who do you know? How can you get a warmer introduction? A lot of what we do is based on subtle indicators, right? How we assess a company, because there's not a lot of data, has to be on kind of nuanced indicators of whether they're a good business or not. And a lot of that, unfortunately, comes from where the referral came from, who they know, what my references are from them, the reference checks I do on them. And so I think just be a great person that has a strong network, and people talk well of you, right? That goes a long way, because either you'll get my attention and I'll reach out to you, or you'll know someone who knows me and can get the right introduction.
Yeah.
While I do think there are some limitations to that, of course, because for people who don't come from super connected backgrounds, I always still look at cold emails, but you've got to really be specific on why this is an exciting opportunity and it's relevant for me and my personal thesis.
Yeah. In just the extension of that, are there qualities that you're looking for in an entrepreneur, again, as distinct from their business? Is there something that you particularly want to see there?
Yeah, so for me in particular, I like hustle, right? I think people who can show that they don't make excuses, that they overcome the challenges of any business or industry that they're facing, and that they're just going to go out there and make stuff happen. I think that in particular, that revolves for me personally around sales. Can you close deals? Can you get in front of the right buyers? Can you, like, do you know your market? Can you form really strong relationships? Those are things that to me are indicators of good entrepreneurs, because you have to get, not number one, you have to be able to get in front of the right people when you don't have a brand or a name or super strong, probably like the product isn't where you want it to be, but you also have to sell people on the vision and show that you can close things before they're fully probably ready to be closed, right? So I like when people, even if they're super early, they sell pilots, they get LOIs for things that aren't fully developed yet. Like, just show that you can hustle, right? That's number one quality for me.
Yeah. You a few moments ago mentioned, talked about blockchain, and I know you've done a lot of work in blockchain. And I think just this week, I saw you were speaking on the state of blockchain in the United States. What is the state of blockchain in the United States, and particularly, what do you think is the state of blockchain in legal, or the potential of blockchain in legal?
Yeah, so state of blockchain is very different from the potential of blockchain, right? I'm a like I said, eternal optimist, and my job is to see the future, right? And to see where things are going. I believe that blockchain will be an important part of the technology stack for a lot of things. The more work I do in the space, the more I believe that's going to take 10 plus years to get there. So I think that the state of blockchain overall is still lots of potential, but not a lot of adoption, especially in the enterprise space that I personally focus on. So there is, if you look at consumer and crypto, that's a very different story. But for me, I look only at enterprise companies and enterprise software. And so enterprise blockchain, the state is honestly not very good in terms of adoption. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of indicators that there's some really cool stuff happening, but the benefits of blockchain only really are achieved at scale, and not one thing, even things built by companies like IBM and some of the other big companies, has achieved the scale it needs to achieve in order to really be worth it. And so we're watching it. We're looking at it. We're, certainly looking at companies that are blockchain enabled and use blockchain in their tech stack. But if you're 100% relying on blockchain for your product, I don't think the market is ready yet. We'll get there, but there should be a kind of short, medium, and long-term plan, and blockchain should be part of the long-term plan.
Yeah. Is it primarily a scale issue? I mean, a couple of years ago, you couldn't go to a legal tech conference without everybody talking about blockchain, and it seems now that it's hard to hear anybody talking about it in legal. I know they're still talking about it. I know there's still work going on blockchain and legal, but it's really taken a back seat to, not even to like AI, which of course was also the buzz a couple of years ago, but more to some of the more practical technologies. The contract tech space is huge right now in legal and areas like that. But so is it with blockchain? Is it a matter of market adoption? Is it a matter of scale? What needs to happen for it to get more widely used?
Yeah, it's a matter of scale. It's about adoption, and it's about adoption at scale, right? You can't just have one or two companies using it. The blockchain, especially enterprise blockchain, is about networks and the efficiencies that happen when you have multiple parties operating on the same blockchain network. So if you have one or two or even 10 companies using the same blockchain, that's nice, but you don't actually but it's expensive to build that as opposed to something that's more centralized. And so you don't actually get the benefits until there are hundreds of people using or thousands of people using that blockchain, depending on what the use case is. So it is this adoption curve. I think around people talking about it is a really interesting thing. I actually see that as a good thing. I used to say when there was all this hype about blockchain is that I look forward to the day when people aren't talking about blockchain and it's as boring as, talking about
Right.
accounting, because
Right.
that's really what it is. It's a boring, it's about accounting for things in a different way. It's a ledger. And so I think what's happening now is either the people who were in it for the hype have gone away. The people who really understand the technology and understand the application to their business are still working on it, but they're not talking about it as much. And the very, very smart people have said, okay, here's my business without blockchain, and here's my business with blockchain. And you can go either way, right? Like if you want to use blockchain, you can. If you don't want to use blockchain, you don't have to.
Yeah. Again, with reference to the legal world, are you looking at or are you aware of any promising uses of blockchain in the legal world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's several. I think the in general, the industries I like for blockchain are around supply chain, and that can be a physical supply chain or a
Hmm.
digital supply chain. Smart contracts is how I got into blockchain.
Yeah.
I ended up going to IBM because I was looking at some of the early smart contracts companies and went, oh, this is really cool, and I need to understand it more. And I still think those companies haven't fully reached their potential, but they're starting to. And so we've looked at a couple of smart contracts companies. We'll continue to do so. Again, to me, it's about the companies that can get traction and actually make money and serve their customers and either use blockchain now or have a clear path to using it down the line. And then in general, I also think anything around payments. So the two categories I look for in blockchain are usually either supply chain or payments. Payments is in the fintech piece of blockchain is much more mature. There's a lot of very real applications. This isn't really necessarily around legal tech, but we started doing a lot more, putting a lot more focus on the gaming and esports space. And there's some really interesting blockchain applications there that are ready for prime time now. And so you look for the use cases that are ready now. And in legal, I think it's really smart contracts. It's anything around provenance or tracking,
Hmm.
things as they change, tracking revisions, tracking so there's a single source of the truth and there's not version control issues. So you can integrate it into contract automation technologies, for example. And then anything around tracking a physical supply chain. So at IBM, we had a shipping supply chain blockchain called TradeLens. And one of the main benefits was that it cut down the legal contracts of shipping something internationally from like 200 legal documents to 20, right? And that's not necessarily a legal tech product, but
Right.
there is a legal implication.
Right. Absolutely. So you have come to this new firm in the middle of a pandemic. You're starting to look at legal tech companies and tech companies more broadly as we are still maybe getting near the tail end of this pandemic. Can you offer any forecast as to what you think lies ahead? What does the market look like over the next couple of years in terms of either legal technology specifically or the technology market more broadly?
Yeah, I think everyone's actually fairly positive about what 2021 will look like, just in terms of the broader tech market and legal tech in general. I think you see, for example, the two massive IPOs of Airbnb and DoorDash this week, and you go, okay, the exit markets are there. And as an investor, that's what we look at. Like, is the liquidity there? What does that look
Hmm.
like? And every time the exit markets start booming, you see a pretty much immediate increase in venture investment. And so I expect that 2021, especially the first half of 2021, will be very frothy and there'll be lots of capital available for companies. And in legal tech in particular, I think that you're starting to see the digital transformation of law firms and of legal departments because they have to as a result of COVID. So the
Right.
companies that are tapping into that, I think will be very successful. The ones that are a bit of a distraction from that might struggle. And so I look for companies where they've got the timing right. And sometimes that's just pure luck. So what companies are actually taking advantage of this crisis? The crisis is a very terrible thing to waste. So like where can you
Right.
actually find opportunity in this crisis and build a really great business? And so those are the types of companies I look for.
Yeah. Anything else, Jules? Any final thoughts before I let you go?
I think, just if you're a legal tech company out there, just my always advice is to build a great business. Don't worry about investment necessarily. Obviously, keep your network strong and focus on growing the business, executing, and selling. Make money, and that's always better than venture capital investment.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to catch up with you and talk to you. It's been a while, and I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thanks, Bob. It's a pleasure as always.
Thanks to Jules Miller for joining us this week. I hope you enjoyed the show. LawNext is produced and edited by Populous Radio. I'm your host, Bob Ambrogi. I hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of LawNext.